Hello everyone, welcome to Right Wing Rising, and to the next installment of my 240 to Win series. Please be sure to like this video down below before you're finished watching, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So in this part of my 240 to Win series, part 6, we're going to be talking about the state of Texas. And for the third video in a row in this series, I will be focusing on primary elections happening in the state at hand instead of the general election. There are 15 key runoffs happening in the state of Texas this Tuesday. There are no runoffs for key statewide offices, and there are also no runoffs for the seats that are up for election in the Texas State Senate. The very important runoff elections that I will be discussing in this video are split among the seats that are up in the U.S. Congress in Texas and those that are up in the Texas State House of Representatives. So let's jump right into it, and let's first focus on the runoffs for the seats that are up in Texas in the United States Congress. And the first one is going to be in the 12th District. This was Kay Granger's district. She was a massive RINO. She was really useless in Congress on the Republican side, and she retired, so that's very good. And the two main candidates that have advanced to the runoff are Craig Goldman, who is the current majority leader of the Texas State House, and John O'Shea. And we can analyze this a little bit more. Craig Goldman is endorsed by Greg Abbott and a slate of state legislatures, a couple other organizations, whereas John O'Shea's big endorsement is Ken Paxton, the sitting Texas Attorney General, who is one of the most controversial, yet also one of the most solid conservatives in the country. And looking at the fundraising numbers, Goldman is way outraising and spending John O'Shea. He's outraised him almost 6-1 and outspent him almost 3-1. In the primary, Goldman got almost 45% of the vote. John O'Shea got 26.4%, but we also can scroll up to the top here, and we can see that two of the candidates, Maddie Parker and Manny Ramirez, that lost in the primary, endorsed Goldman. So that's not good for John O'Shea. He is the more conservative candidate in the race, but he will have to woo some of the voters from the candidates that lost in the primary to his side, even though those candidates mostly endorsed Goldman. I do not think O'Shea is favored in the runoff, but I'm still rooting for John O'Shea because he has that political outsider brand that tends to lean towards a more conservative voting record if elected, and that's important. So this is a big one to keep an eye on. In the 23rd District, this is the marquee matchup of the night. Tony Gonzalez, the incumbent U.S. representative, got forced into a primary by Brandon Herrera, who is a YouTuber and a firearms manufacturer. Big Second Amendment guy, in case you couldn't tell. And Tony Gonzalez is a really horrendous representative. He's a big RINO. He's just really, really weak. He has a really weak voting record and likes to cave on a lot of issues, especially when it comes to the border. He's not as strong as you would think he would be, especially being the representative for a border district. He has a decent amount of endorsements, which is both surprising and disappointing. Greg Abbott endorsed him. Dan Patrick, the lieutenant governor, endorsed him. Ronnie Jackson, who is a really good representative, endorsed him. So that's a little bit surprising, truthfully. But Herrera also has a decent amount of endorsements. He has a lot of U.S. representatives endorsing him, mostly from the House Freedom Caucus. He has Sid Miller, the Agriculture Commissioner of Texas, which is a pretty big endorsement. It's a statewide figure, and he's very conservative and well-known in Texas. He got the official House Freedom Caucus endorsement, and Donald Trump, disappointingly, decided not to endorse in this race. It would have been a huge help to Herrera if he had endorsed against Gonzalez. And in the fundraising game, Herrera's raised a lot of money. He's raised over $1 million, spent almost $1 million. But Gonzalez is still outraising and outspending Herrera by a 3-1 margin. And in the primary, Tony Gonzalez got 45% of the vote. Herrera got almost 25%. But the good thing is, the other candidates that have dropped out have mostly endorsed Herrera. So this will be an uphill climb for Herrera. He's trying to knock off an incumbent, and that incumbent almost got 50% of the vote in the primary. So he's really going to have to try and get all of the voters for the other candidates behind him to try and take down Gonzalez this Tuesday. I think he has a real shot. There's no polling from this race to give an indicator of which way it's leaning. And while just as the incumbent I think Gonzalez has an advantage, I really want to see Herrera pull this off. He would be a huge upgrade over Gonzalez, and everyone should be rooting for him, and if you live in this district, definitely vote for Brandon Herrera. He's an actual conservative, unlike Gonzalez, who's just a weak squish in Congress. This is Texas, for crying out loud. We need someone a little bit stronger in this seat, especially for a border district with the border crisis in full swing in Texas of all places. We need Brandon Herrera in this seat. It would be a huge win if he is able to pick up the upset and win on Tuesday. Finally, moving over to the 28th district. This is currently a Democrat seat held by the incumbent Henry Cuellar, and he won renomination unopposed. And the Republican nomination is a battle between Jay Furman and Lazaro Garza Jr., who are both raising and spending a similar amount. They're kind of going head-to-head. In the primary, Jay Furman got 45%, and Lazaro Garza got 27%. It's really not important which candidate wins this seat. This is more of an interesting one to keep an eye on to watch the total votes in the primary, as the Republicans got about 9,000 less votes than Henry Cuellar did in his uncontested primary. So you want to see what's the energy in the seat for Republicans. What's the turnout? It's not so much important which candidate wins. This is not a highly publicized race to know a lot about either candidate in any detail. But that's really the big thing about this seat. So those are the three key congressional runoffs for Republicans this Tuesday that you want to pay attention to, and the results of which have some varying importance. Now, moving over to the Texas State House, this is an interesting one. So the first political dynamic that weighed on the Republican primaries in the state of Texas for the State House is that Ken Paxton, in May of last year, was impeached by the House on bogus charges. He spoke out against Dade Phelan, you can see right here, the House Speaker in the State House of Texas, who is a special kind of rhino. He's basically a Democrat. He's propped up by the Democrats to be the House Speaker. It's really unbelievable. More on him in a minute. But Ken Paxton came out and rebuked Dade Phelan for being drunk on the State House floor while business was being conducted. Dade Phelan was already not a big fan of Ken Paxton because the Attorney General is very conservative while he is a rhino and a moderate. Since he was angered by Paxton's comments, he took this as an opportunity to strike back, make up bogus charges, and impeach him. A lot of House Republicans, the majority of them, fell in line behind Phelan and impeached Ken Paxton. But in September last year, he was acquitted in the Senate unanimously by all Republicans of these bogus charges. So that's the first dynamic. The second political dynamic weighing on these Republican primaries is Greg Abbott's failure to pass a school voucher bill, which he had pushed for. But these efforts ultimately failed after 4 special sessions were called by Abbott, mind you, when 21 Republicans voted with Democrats on an amendment to strip the voucher provisions from the House's education bill. And the proposed school voucher system that was trying to be passed was meant to implement a form of school choice, which is usually a very good thing and is pretty popular with a lot of conservatives across the country. It would give parents the ability and the resources to have their child attend the school of their choice, the school that they found best suited for their family and for their child in most cases. This is a very good idea. But a lot of Republicans, for whatever reason, moved over to the left side of the aisle and voted with the Democrats to kill the bill. And this really ruffled a lot of feathers of conservatives in the state of Texas and really brought on the ire of Greg Abbott. So much so that he called for primary challengers to these state legislators that sided with the Democrats to kill the bill in hopes of getting it passed next time with more conservative voices in the state legislature. So with that background, we can see that 9 Republicans retired and did not run for re-election. We can see that 9 Republicans lost renomination in the primaries earlier this year. And all 9 Republicans either supported the impeachment of Ken Paxton or they did not support the school voucher bill and voted to kill it. So all 9 results were positive developments for conservatives in Texas. And scrolling down here, we can see that 8 Republicans were forced into primary runoff elections, which is what I will be discussing now. The incumbent in each of these races could not secure the nomination in the normal primary, and it had to be forced into a runoff because they got less than 50% of the vote the first time round. There are also 4 runoffs where there is not an incumbent in the runoff because they had retired and not run for re-election. So it's also important to pay attention to those to see who gets nominated to replace the retiring incumbent and make sure it's the best possible option. So let's go through these rather quickly because there are a lot of them and they're rather simple to break down, quite honestly. In the 1st district, Gary Van Dever is the incumbent. He got 45.5% of the vote. Van Dever voted for both the impeachment of Ken Paxton and also against the school voucher system. So he's pretty awful on both fronts. In the 12th district, this is an open primary with no incumbent. Both of them were neck and neck in the original primary, so this is really anyone's game. And both of them are pretty solid conservatives. So I think no matter who wins, there will be a conservative upgrade in this seat because the incumbent Republican in this seat is one of almost 10 Republicans that retired. So it's important to replace them with people that would be more like Ken Paxton and less like Dade Phelan, the RINO House Speaker. Now moving on to the 21st district, we have the big one, Dade Phelan himself. He got forced into a runoff, getting a little bit over 43% of the vote, 3 points and 1,000 votes less than his challenger, David Covey. And the big development in this seat is Donald Trump endorsed Dave Covey. So did Sid Miller, so did Dan Patrick, so did Ken Paxton, 3 statewide officials. If any runoff is to go the conservatives' way on Tuesday, it has to be this one. Phelan must lose renomination. This is the big one. This is the one to keep an eye on. District 21. Make sure you're watching the results for that as they come in. The 29th district, this is another open seat where the incumbent Republican is retiring. Jeffrey Berry versus Alex Kamkar is the runoff. Alex Kamkar seems to be the more conservative option. They were both neck and neck. Both were very close to 50%. I hope Alex Kamkar is able to pull this one out. In the 30th district, another open seat, we have Jeff Bouknight against AJ Louderback. To be honest, I could not find much information about either candidate. They both seem to be solid Texas conservatives. I think it will be an upgrade in the seat again, no matter what. Going to the 33rd district, we have the incumbent Justin Holland forced into a runoff. He's another really bad Republican member of the Texas House. He voted to impeach Ken Paxton against the school voucher legislation. Katrina Pearson is endorsed by Greg Abbott and other key members of the Texas Republican Party. She finished 200 votes ahead of the incumbent in the primary. I hope she pulls it off in the runoff. That would be a big upset and a big flip. In the 44th district, the incumbent, John Kuempel, is running for re-election. He's one of the defectors that voted against the school voucher legislation. And I would say the incumbent is favored to go down in this seat since Alan Schoolcraft almost cleared 50% the first time around. In the 58th district, right here, we have the incumbent Dwayne Burns, who only got 41% against his challenger, Helen Kerwin, who got 49% of the vote and almost 2,000 more votes than the incumbent. Another incumbent that I think is favored to go down based on his primary showing, and another one that opposed the school voucher legislation. So another Republican that deserves to lose renomination. And then in the 61st district, we have Frederick Frazier, who only got 32% of the vote in the primary, finishing 8 points behind his main challenger, Carissa Richardson. Frazier voted to impeach Ken Paxton, and hopefully he goes down in this runoff. In the 64th, over here, we have Lynn Stuckey, who got about 1,000 less votes than her main challenger, Andy Hopper. Another runoff to keep an eye on. In the 91st district, we have Stephanie Click, who finished at only 48% and 2 points above her challenger. She might be favored to hold on here since she almost got 50% of the vote in the primary. And finally, in the 97th district, this is Craig Goldman, who we talked about at the beginning of the video. He's running in the 12th district in Texas for the U.S. Congress. And this seems to be the most uncompetitive runoff of the bunch. Cheryl Bean got 49.5% of the vote, finishing over 3,500 votes ahead of her nearest challenger. And she also seems to be the best candidate of the two in this runoff. And I think it's highly likely that she wins. So there you have it. 12 of these districts have runoffs that you should pay attention to, that are very important. To recap, 8 of these districts have incumbents that are establishment, that are RINOs, that have been forced into a runoff. Those are the key ones. Those are District 1, 21, 33, 44, 58, 61, 64, and 91. Those are the big ones. And the other four, District 12, 29, 30, and 97, those are open runoffs, where there is no incumbent, the incumbent has retired, and it's important to pay attention to just to see the replacement that you want to see the best conservative option win nomination in that district. But if you're going to pay attention to any of them on election night this Tuesday, because there are obviously a lot to keep track of here, in addition to the 3 competitive Republican runoffs for U.S. Congress, pay attention to the 21st District and hope and pray that Dade Phelan goes down and gets defeated by David Covey, because he is the king of the RINOs in the Texas state legislature. And if he goes down, in addition to Tony Gonzalez in the U.S. Congress, it will make for a phenomenal night.